An unprecedented year for video games. 2023 is certainly turning out to be very interesting for both its successes as well as its failures, and it's quite possible that this could tip the whole balance of where the video games industry heads over the next few years. This has all been capped off in recent days by the massive success of Baldur's Gate 3. Now, there's been huge numbers here, 814,000 players at its peak. This makes it one of the most popular games on Steam of all time. In fact, it puts it squarely at position 9, as we can see right here. Only bet out by 8 other titles, a few of them, most of them in fact, multiplayer games, the likes of PUBG and Counter-Strike of course, but also the massive marketing machine that was behind Cyberpunk 2077, as well as the awesome game of Elden Ring. These are the only real titles that stand in front of it. And even today, nearly a week after release, the numbers on Baldur's Gate 3 are still very high. We can see it peaked at 814,000 over on Sunday, and yes, people returned to work and school and all that other stuff, but we're still hitting 660,000 peak players, and likely those numbers are going to still be very good by the weekend. Over on Steam, we can see this game is still overwhelmingly positive, and this is quite a rarity, I needn't tell you that. Nearly 60,000 reviews, and yes, it's looking very good. Metacritic tells the same story, at 96% from the critics and an audience score of 9.3. So both critics alike as well as the audience seem to be sharing the same opinions. The really interesting thing about this is that, Baldur's Gate 3 is a very niche game. It's a niche genre. It comes from the CRPG genre, which up until this point has never really had massive success. Well, it has had big success, but not on the scale that we're seeing here with Baldur's Gate 3. And in my opinion, what this really shows us is that it all comes down to, quality and developer attitude. And this is something that players really do appreciate. They love a quality game. We all love quality games. And we really do like a developer who respects the players. In my opinion, this is something that could shake up the industry. Not quite in the sense of this game being an anomaly and multiple other games just like Baldur's Gate 3 coming out in the future, but rather the fact that, it's really proving that quality as well as respect is where the money is. And quite naturally, that means it's not all about big AAA titles. It's about quality and respecting the audience. And we've seen that with games such as Dave the Diver as well as BattleBit. We can see Dave the Diver has had an all-time peak of 100,000 players over on Steam. Those are huge numbers for an indie title. They're huge numbers for any title actually, but especially an indie title. And of course BattleBit as well, which is still relatively new, peaking at 87,000 players and still receiving 30,000 daily players. These are huge numbers that are comparable and even exceed other AAA games. Now, if all of this doesn't wake up the games industry, and I really think it should, we can also look at other big titles that have released this year as well. We got the likes of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, the Dead Space remake from EA no less, and that should really hammer some points home, as well as Final Fantasy 16. There's a few more we could point out as well, but these are some really good examples, and let's have a look what's going on there. Legends of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. Again, the critic score over on Metacritic, 96%, audience score 8.5. Again, sharing similar opinions. Dead Space remake, 89% critic score, 8.7 on the user score. Final Fantasy 16, a little lower here, we're just edging below 90%, but again, similar reception from both the critics as well as the audience, 87% and 8.2 respectively. I think it's fair then to point out that these titles all have a few things in common. They're completely different games. You can't get more different than Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom versus Dead Space, really, can you? Both completely opposite ends of the spectrum. They're completely different extremes. But nonetheless, I think they do, all these titles share something in common. They respect players' time and understand the wants of their respective audiences. And what that means is, you don't see any time grinds here. Well, you do, as Legends of Zelda does have some time grinds, but they're generally very respectful. They're not doing so to try and keep you hooked into the game, just to try and make you earn money. and they know what the player wants. They're giving you a game that they know is going to deliver, that they know the audience is actually after. It's got a little bit tiring, I think, in recent times to keep hearing from various different studios that when an audience doesn't like the game, that it's the audience at fault rather than the developer. And it's nice to see that there are still some studios that really do understand they should give the audience what they want. Another thing that these titles share in common is they do not fleece the player for time or money. Now, the point aside that yes, these titles are very expensive, games have kind of gone up in price over the years, but you don't see any of these titles absolutely chock full of microtransactions. They may have a few here and there, a few cosmetics, but that ultimately isn't the point of the game. That's not the ultimate drive. They're not trying to monetize every single click and every single moment that you spend in the game. Instead, they're providing a rewarding experience. And in turn, this is rewarding for the developers because yes, these titles are selling and shifting huge volumes. Another point that these titles all have in common is that the developers really go above and beyond to make a quality experience, and that can't be overstated. As far as I'm concerned then, the success we're seeing of these titles at the moment and the success we're seeing with Baldur's Gate 3 is not just about being a mega budget title. It's not about coming from a AAA studio, or not necessarily just about the decades worth of experience that some of these studios do have, although that of course does count. And don't forget, we are seeing these indie titles such as Dave the Diver and BattleBit, which have also had massive success as well. The thing is that all of these titles are great because they are quality products. It's not about the budget, not necessarily. It's about how they've been put together as games and the ultimate experience that they are delivering. I think then this is why we're seeing so many failed titles in recent times, simply because the studios are not following this formula. Instead, they're chasing the bottom line, the interests of the shareholders and other interests, anything other than just making this quality exceptional product. And whilst I'm sure there's developers on all of these titles that really do put their every single effort into the game, trying to make it the best they possibly can, the fact remains that many titles in recent times have come under fire, and deservedly so. Diablo 4, for example, very recently had an update, its first season, and there was huge problems for this. This led to the game being review bombed and a massive drop of interest in the title. You can see here a user score of 2, and well, ultimately the point here is a lack of respect to the player's time and constantly fleecing the players for money. Redfall 2.2, a user score. This one has a very low critical score as well. What went wrong? Well, ultimately not respecting the player. The game just wasn't functional or up to task. We can see this reflects in player numbers over on Redfall. It had a peak of 6,000 players. This is very, very low for a game coming from a big studio, especially a title that was highly marketed and highly anticipated. Now this one is a little bit more interesting, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Actually a pretty decent game, but it has got some mixed user scores, and this is largely again down to, well, we could say respect for the players, or a bit of a lack of respect because of the performance issues and the other issues that the game did launch with. Could EA be aware of these issues before the game even launched? I suspect very likely, although we've got no way of knowing that for sure, just personal opinion, but it seems very possible. Either way, this game peaked at 67,000 players. That's pretty respectable for a AAA game. The big one this year, of course, the massive failure, is Lord of the Rings Gollum. A Metascore of 34, a user score of 1.1, and again we come back to that old chestnut, really just not respecting the player. Unfortunately, this game peaked at just 758 players. Well, fortunately, I guess, because not too many people actually made the mistake of purchasing this one by the looks of it. And finally, we come to Last of Us Part 1, user score of 2.8. And again, this was generally down to the multitude, and this is the PC release, by the way, the remake. This is largely due to the multitude of problems that came with the game. Ultimately then, what it's all about is, I think people are tired of games and studios which do the following. Do not respect the players, fleece the players for every single penny. They monetize every single action within the game and just put in time sinks or gate content away from the player, meaning you have to spend more money or invest huge chunks of time. Finally, this year so far, perhaps more than any other in recent years, has shown that quality games and quality studios do still exist. And Lorient Studios really is at the forefront of this right at the moment. And I think they are kind of leading the charge in showing what is possible. Again, it doesn't mean that all studios have to make these big, massive, all-performing games with big, massive budgets. It just means they really need to make the best version of the game that they're aiming for. Show respect to the players, respect the players' time, don't fleece the players for every single penny. And as they say, the proof really is in the pudding. We're seeing this year just what can happen when studios and games do deliver on those points. Will 2023 be a turning point for the games industry? Well, time will tell on that front. If developers want from today to start walking this new path, it's going to take a while to see that reflected because, yes, games take years to produce. So it'll be a while before we do actually see any changes. Yeah, what do you think about all that? Let me know in the comments section. Is 2023 just an anomaly? Have we had a few good games and probably going to return to the old format of dumpster fire after dumpster fire? Or do you think we could be following a new trend here? Let me know in the comments section below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.